Hey, so have you heard this?
We're not a democracy, we're a constitutional republic. Get it right.
Yep, or some variation thereof. Now, you might be like me, and when you first heard this, you went, my god, what a fucking idiot. A constitutional republic is a type of democracy. Duh. But unfortunately, don't write these people off as idiots. This is actually a very dangerous form of propaganda that you need to be aware of. So this is going to be a long series where we dive into all the reasons why this is so dangerous. And the TLDR, in case you don't see the rest of this series, it is so that they can keep minority rule. That's the simple version, but it goes a lot deeper. Part 2. First, we're going to go over some definitions so we all have a basic understanding of things. And I'm so excited I get to use my political science degree. All right, first up, what is a democracy? A democracy is a form of government where the people have a level of authority in making decisions about that government and how it's run. There are many types of democracies, and they generally vary based on who the people are and what level of authority they have. So a pure or direct democracy is one where every single person has the right to vote on every single issue and question before the government. Now, as you can imagine, a direct democracy can get pretty tedious. If everyone has to vote on everything, that's a lot of voting. So instead, most democracies are some form of a representative democracy. In a representative democracy, the people vote on people to represent them. In our case, we do a lot of voting in a lot of elections from local, state to federal, and we are choosing people who will represent our beliefs and our interests in the running of our government. Now, why do we have that other than a direct being, just tedious? Well, from the days of Plato to John Adams to even modern day Republicans, there has been a strong push to not allow the masses to vote on everything. Basically, their biggest fear is that if we had a pure democracy, that the masses would always ultimately vote for a redistribution of wealth and resources, and we would eventually turn into a socialist society or a communist or even worse, like anarchy. Okay, so we're going to have representatives instead, right? Now, what kind of representatives we should have? That has also been up for debate over the years. Plato felt that the only people who should be allowed to run for office were basically those who were experts, who had the training, education, knowledge, skills, etc. to effectively govern. You don't want Joe Schmo off the street being one of your representatives. So our founding fathers, however, while they also firmly believed that our politicians should be experts and well-educated, the upper class, if you will, they took a different approach and they focused more on the who should be allowed to choose our leaders. Because if we have an educated electorate, then we will have good politicians that are voted in that will be able to rule and govern effectively. So this group of white men, our founding fathers, they made the decision that obviously the only people who get to vote and choose who governs us are white male property owners. But after many, many years and a lot of hard fights, we're now in a position in America where most of our citizens can vote, in theory. But even today, there is still a fight to control who gets to vote and who they get to vote for. So modern day Republicans have also realized that in the past 23 years, they've only won the popular vote for president one time, and that was George W. Bush's second term after 9/11, and we had just started the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. So yeah, they realized that they need to retain minority rule. And after both Bush and Trump lost the popular vote but won the presidency, there was a growing push in America to ditch the Electoral College for being antiquated and classist in favor of a popular vote. So this scared the ever-living out of Republicans. So the ideal of a democracy where the people and majority rule that's a really bad idea for them. They don't want that. They like their minority rule because they know it's the only way that they can rule, at least consistently. I mean, hell, this is a large reason why they push to have the Voting Rights Act gutted in the courts, that they have refused to reaffirm the Voting Rights Act, or the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, that they have gerrymandered the absolute fuck out of red states. Look at Florida and how bad it's been gerrymandered. It's insane. We used to be a purple state where we were a mix. No, we are a red state now for a number of reasons, but largely due to the gerrymandering. But in order to maintain this minority rule, they have to start convincing their people that that's the way it should be, that this is the way the founders wanted it, that they never wanted a democracy where the masses were able to vote and choose and decide. No. Only those who should, the right kind of people. Those are the only ones that should be making the decisions on things. And therefore, they have to convince the masses that that's the way it should be. And in fact, a very scary rise in Republican rhetoric has been a further and further drift away from democracy and towards a theocracy or authoritarianism or even dictatorship. In fact, the amount of power that has been shifted on the state level from state legislatures and courts to the office of governor is frightening. If you want some examples of that, again, look at Florida and DeSantis and the amount of power that he has taken over. I mean, hell, he drew the maps, the gerrymandered to hell and back maps. He drew those because the state legislature drew the maps in accordance with our state constitution. And he said, no, we're not going to do that. He has shifted so much power away from our legislature and to the office of the governor. It's insane. He is a mini dictator. And of course, Trump and George W. Bush also did a lot of shifting of power from the legislature or even the courts over to the executive branch. So this is a running theme that they have had going on, this very much leaning towards an authoritarian or a theocracy or a dictatorship, far, far away from the masses being able to control anything. And I'm going to go off on a little side tangent here because this is not the first time that we have seen this throughout our history, not American history per se, but throughout the history of the world. We have seen democracies rise and fall. We saw it in Germany in the 1930s and 40s. Remember, they voted in the mustache guy, and then he turned it into a dictatorship. We've also seen this happen in modern days. Look at Poland and the fall of their democracy. It can happen. And if you want an example on a whole different level, look at Star Wars. Star Wars was originally set up as a galactic republic where they had a senate that everybody voted on, etc. And then through a lot of lies, some political fuckery and manipulation, they voted to give Palpatine the power. They voted to turn it into an empire. It can happen. And it's amazing to me the number of Republicans and conservatives especially, that when they watch those movies, they're cheering for the bad guy. They're cheering for Vader and the Emperor. It makes sense. And I firmly believe, and some studies have shown this in polls, that there is a very significant portion of Republicans, conservatives, Christian nationalists that would willingly vote and choose to become a dictatorship, a totalitarianism, a theocracy, etc., etc., as long as they are certain that they're the ones that are going to retain the power. So this also has a marketing level effect. So subliminally, if you're a Republican, you believe in the republic, right? And if you're a Democrat, you believe in democracy. Well, the villainization of Democrats and democracy and liberals plays right into their marketing and propaganda. And during the course of their villainization of Democrats and democracy, they have pulled some truly heinous examples. So they have pushed this narrative that Democrats and democracy lead to the evils of socialism and communism or anarchy or even worse. And the examples that they use, well, first they go back to 1930s Germany because that was a democracy. See how well that went. And then in modern times, they point to North Korea. Why? Because North Korea's actual name is the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Totally ignoring what the actual country and government really are. But they also point to China, who considers itself a democracy, and even Russia. And of course, these arguments, to any academic or anybody with half a mind would go, that's absolutely ridiculous, because we all know that none of those countries are actually democracies. North Korea is a straight up dictatorship, period. Russia has turned into an autocracy that barely holds up the charade of being a democracy. I mean, the initial reports of the last election, Putin won by like 98% or something ridiculous. They ended up going back and changing it because everybody called BS. Because at no point in history has 98% of the population ever agreed on something. And, China, it's an autocracy. None of those are true democracies, not even representative democracies. So at the end of the day, as Democrats, liberals, and leftists are pushing towards more democratic policies and running of our government, like we want things like to abolish the Electoral College. We want ranked choice voting so that it is a fairer representation and maybe eventually break up the two-party system. That is the antithesis of what Republicans want. They want to retain their minority rule because they know if every single person got to vote, they wouldn't win. And this is the motivation behind all the voter suppression. They don't want everybody voting. That's like the worst thing for them because if everybody could vote, they would lose. So they have to push this propaganda and do voter suppression and gerrymandering. And there's also been a concerted effort in a lot of the states to make more and more crimes felonies because many states still have on the books laws that say once you commit a felony, you don't get to vote anymore. So not only, and for some, it's you don't get to vote again ever. But even in states that have tried to restore felon voter rights, oh, nay, we cannot have that. The Republicans in Florida fought that tooth and nail and made all these crazy restrictions and requirements. And then even still, after people had been told they could vote, DeSantis arrested them for voting. All right, so we're finally at the end. I hope this is the end. There might be some follow-ups. But just know, when you hear someone say,
We're not a democracy, we're a constitutional republic, get it right.
Know that they are just parroting Republican propaganda and that they are perpetuating a distinctly un-American ideal that leads us away from democracy and towards authoritarianism. And that's not good, and it's not patriotic.